So the Chiefs have officially signed their backup quarterback, and it's definitely not who anybody was expecting. And in fact, it's hilarious because their rival is helping pay part of his salary this season. So I've got to talk about that, a ton of cap space the Chiefs freed up yesterday, surprising players being tendered, and more. But first, how about those? All right, so yesterday at 4 p.m. Eastern or 3 p.m. Arrowhead time was officially the start of the 2025 new league year, and what that meant for all 32 teams was each of them had to be salary cap compliant, or more simply put, under the salary cap. During the legal tampering period that started on Monday and even prior, teams could actually be over the salary cap, and the Chiefs definitely were the day prior. So Monday, March 11th, the Chiefs were dead last in cap space at negative $16.9 million. A big part of that was due to them franchise tagging Trey Smith, among other moves, combined with cap hits from their currently rostered players for this upcoming season. So to remedy that, we all knew restructures would be coming, but I was hopeful that a long-term deal with Trey Smith could potentially get done as well, so you aren't forced to restructure someone's contract so heavily. Well, long story short, there wasn't a long-term deal done with Trey Smith by that time, so in order to get under the cap, the Chiefs restructured the contracts of Patrick Mahomes and Chris Jones, creating nearly $50 million in cap space. According to Derrick of Chiefs Digest, it's a combination of base salary conversion and roster bonus conversions, with both players getting a signing bonus that's prorated over the next 5 years, most likely 4 for Chris Jones because the Chiefs hate adding void years. The Chiefs rarely ever utilize that, so we'll see if they actually do, but I am more concerned about Chris Jones's contract here in a few years over Mahomes, because that restructure will inflate his cap hits, and even though Mahomes and Chris Jones are near the same age, obviously quarterbacks can play at a high level well into their late 30s, meanwhile defensive linemen will start to taper off much quicker. I guess that's a worry for another day though, because now the Chiefs have plenty of cap space and could even get more once Trey Smith gets a long-term deal done. I mean, hopefully it gets done, please. You want to see something funny though? After that restructure of Mahomes' contract, his 2026 cap hit is $78 million and his 2027 cap hit is $74 million. And while that is wild to look at, we all know that once Mahomes got his pay raise back in September of 2023, both sides reportedly plan to revisit his deal again after the 2026 season. It could happen after this year, I guess, but either way, the point is, do not be concerned about his future cap hits. They've restructured his contract a few times since 2021, and the way they set up this contract is genius and very team-friendly. Anyway, freeing up that near $50 million in cap space should give KC enough wiggle room for draft picks, miscellaneous roster moves needed throughout the season, and also, in theory, even more free agent signings here soon. There's still needs on the roster that need filled even before the draft. So an obvious question most of you probably have right now is, how much cap space does that actually leave the Chiefs with? Well, right now, Over the Cap lists the Chiefs' cap space at $28 million, and SpotTrack has them at $29.6 million, but it doesn't yet include all the player signings, so this is definitely going to go down. Next up, the Chiefs got awarded 2 compensatory picks in the 2025 NFL Draft, bringing their total at the moment to 8 picks. As a reminder, compensatory picks are awarded by the league to teams that lost more or better compensatory free agents than they signed in the previous year. Picks are positioned from round 3 to round 7 based on the value of the compensatory free agents lost, and the formula that determines compensatory free agents is based on salary, playing time, and postseason honors. And with that, 2 7th-round picks for KC it is. You can now see all the picks they have for this year's draft. They got a first, a second, 2 thirds, a fourth, and 3 7ths. KC gave up their 5th rounder in the trade midseason for DeAndre Hopkins, their 6th the season prior to get Hardman back from the Jets, and then 2 more 7ths when they traded for Peyton Hendershot from Dallas and Cameron Thomas from Arizona last season just prior to the trade deadline. Honestly, I wouldn't sweat this in the slightest. Yes, they lost a couple of late round picks here. They were given up for players who didn't really contribute. I get it, but a 6th or a 7th round pick is often a flyer you take on a guy that teams think they might be able to get as an undrafted free agent, but don't want to risk them signing with another team. And with KC lacking a 5th and a 6th round pick, I wouldn't be surprised if there was a trade back with one of their earlier picks to collect one of these 5th or 6th rounders, and or multiple 7ths used to move up and get a guy. I highly doubt they draft 8 players. It's not impossible, but in the Veach era, he's drafted 6 players in 2018, 2019, 2020, and 2021, 10 players in 2022 because of all the extra picks from the Tyreek Hill trade. Then in 2023 and 2024, there's been 7 players drafted. So outside of the year KC got 5 extra picks for Tyreek, it's been 6 or 7, which is probably where it'll land once again this year, unless they do some crazy, wild, surprising trade. And then football season might be over, but there's still plenty of other sports being played and events going on all year long, from Sporting KC, KC Current, the Royals, the NBA, and even March Madness. Well, that is where my special hookup from today's sponsor, SeatGeek, comes right in. You can use my code HBTC10 and get 10% off any tickets on SeatGeek, whether you are a new customer or not. This also includes other events that are not sports related, like comedians, concerts, my wife is going to see James Arthur in June, festivals, and much more. Plus, SeatGeek makes the process easy for you, rating tickets on a scale of 1 to 10. So when you search around, just look for the green dots. Green means good, red means bad. And no matter how many times you've bought tickets using SeatGeek before, code HBTC10 is going to get it done. So what are you waiting for? Take out your phone. After watching this video, of course, open the SeatGeek app up and add code HBTC10 to your account ASAP to take advantage of my special discount. All right, we all know by now that Justin Reid is a New Orleans Saint. I wish him the best in his next chapter there. Bummed to see him go. But it was interesting to see that the Titans and Eagles were also in on trying to sign him, and it reportedly went down to the wire. I personally thought he'd become an Eagle since they traded away CJ Gardner-Johnson to the Texans, but I personally like him with the Saints much better, as it's a team where he joins former Chief Tyrann Mathieu, a guy I have a lot of respect for, but also a team that didn't just curb stomp the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. Something else I found interesting was that the Chiefs were indeed in on trying to bring over Ravens veteran left tackle Ronnie Stanley before signing Jalen Moore, who was formerly with the 49ers as their backup left tackle. Ronnie Stanley ended up signing a 3-year, $60 million deal to stay with the Ravens, and the Chiefs, I guess, were right around that same ballpark number, $20 million a year. The problem is you need to most likely offer more than that to convince a player to move his entire life and family after playing for the same team for 9 years. It really seemed like Stanley just wanted to stay in Baltimore, though, as the Commanders and Patriots reportedly offered him more than $24 million or so per year, and he opted to stay. In the end, I'm kind of glad KC didn't land the soon-to-be 31-year-old tackle that's played 1 full season since 2020. Will Jalen Moore be better than Stanley? I mean, probably not, but a 2-year deal for Moore, especially considering what they paid him, who is also nearly 4 years younger, sounds pretty good to me at this point in time. He officially signed his contract today, by the way, as did Elijah Mitchell, so those deals are done. Some other former Chiefs players who are done in KC recently signed with other teams, and I'm always rooting for former Chiefs players because why the heck not? MVS signed a 1-year deal with the Seahawks yesterday, and with DK Metcalf being traded away to the Steelers, Seattle can use the help, though I would not call MVS a direct replacement for DK Metcalf. Then Demarcus Robinson signed a 2-year deal with the 49ers, who are in a rebuild and also need the wide receiver help after trading away Deebo Samuel to the Washington Commanders. I've already gone over a lot of these other players that have signed elsewhere, but you can see the full list here on the screen and where they went. But they included Samaje Perine, Justin Watson, Turk Wharton, Justin Reid, DeAndre Hopkins, and then today, even defensive end Joshua Uche found himself a new home, inking a 1-year deal with the Eagles. I wish the guy well, even though KC traded for him last season and basically never used him, so maybe the Eagles will give him a real shot out there on the field. Next up, the Chiefs did make a few more recent moves. Yesterday, they signed defensive end Malik Herring back on a 1-year deal. Herring is a rotational depth piece they lean on from time to time. He saw an uptick in snaps last season in particular prior to the return of Charles Omenihu, and then he eventually got phased out when Omenihu returned after being back or being cleared of that ACL surgery he had in the offseason. I don't mind the Herring signing at all, and it makes sense because you can never have enough depth along the D-line. Honestly, they need more D-line help at the moment, so I'm expecting a signing sooner rather than later. Please, defensive tackle, edge, don't care, they need it. Anyway, from there, KC offered a right of refusal tender to 2 players, cornerback Nazeeh Johnson and linebacker Jack Cochran. Those offers, by the way, are for $3.263 million for the 2025 season. And before I break down a little bit of what that means, I just want to point out that they did not offer tenders to a few other players: tight end Peyton Hendershot, cornerback Keith Taylor, and kicker Spencer Schrader. Okay, so the right of refusal tender offers each player a $3.3 million salary for the upcoming season. Should either sign a contract with another team, the Chiefs would have the right to match the offer, but would receive no compensation if they allow the player to walk. Now, while the $3.3 million looks a bit expensive, I do want to note this. Tenders are not guaranteed. Jared Sapp of Arrowhead Pride, you should follow him on X, by the way, because he knows his stuff. Very underrated follow, in my opinion. But he points out that neither player will be paid any money until the first regular season game, and KC could still negotiate a lower compensation for either player, so I wouldn't worry about the $3.3 million salary right now. And most likely, none of these players actually end up seeing that much. So they would first need to make the 53-man roster, which they both very well could, but from there, similar to what the Chiefs did with Andrew Wiley a couple years back, you can see a little bit more detail of what happened here on the screen from over the cap, but the Chiefs could renegotiate the contract to guarantee these guys a roster spot for the year, but at a lower amount. Now, Nazeeh Johnson was drafted in 2022 with the rest of the Fab Five: Trent McDuffie, Jalen Watson, Joshua Williams, Brian Cook, and then Nazeeh was the fifth, but he was waived after his rookie training camp, re-signing to the roster a bit later, which is why he's a restricted free agent, in case any of you were confused about that. Anyway, of course, when this news hit about Nazeeh, many around Chiefs Kingdom did not like that news about him being tendered. You can see comment after comment of complaints on the thread, but honestly, Nazeeh is a great special teamer and is a fine rotational depth piece for the secondary in case of emergency. The problem was injuries in the room last season forced him to play a bunch in his first year back after tearing his ACL, but that's why I like the cornerback Christian Fulton signing so much that the Chiefs made this week. If injuries happen, they can rotate people in more strategically in theory. Also, remember, Nazeeh played safety in college, with KC opting to make him switch to play corner. Yes, he struggled out there at times. I mean, that's not a surprise, a secret. We all know that. But after trading away L'Jarius Sneed and Jalen Watson breaking his ankle, they asked a lot out of their depth guys, and it certainly was not easy for several of them. And I know I have some bias here. It's no secret he's a friend of the channel, having interviewed on here multiple times. But the fact is, KC clearly values him enough to tender him. He's super athletic. Relative athletic score of 9.09, will be another year removed from the torn ACL, another year integrated into the system, and gets to compete for a spot on the roster once again this offseason. Now, linebacker Jack Cochran is actually coming off of a fractured ankle sustained week 16, but he's a very valued special teamer, playing more snaps than nearly anyone every single year since he was brought onto the team. Then in 2023, this is very important, when Nick Bolton was injured and Drew Tranquill was filling in at the Mike linebacker spot, he suffered a concussion himself in a game, and Jack Cochran was the next man called upon as the Mike linebacker, wearing the green dot, and had a pretty solid game, all things considered. So we'll see what ends up happening with these tenders. They likely got offered a deal that they didn't want, so KC tendered them, and we will then see what happens here later down the road. Next up, and some of the most surprising and recent news of the day, Thursday, March 13th, around 5 p.m., it was announced that the Chiefs have found their backup quarterback. And no, it is not Carson Wentz. It's actually a former AFC West quarterback of a rival in quarterback Gardner Minshew. The Chiefs are signing former Raiders starter Gardner Minshew as their backup quarterback to Patrick Mahomes. It's a one-year deal for Minshew, who still has guaranteed money coming from Las Vegas. That is the funniest thing in the world to me. The Chiefs are getting a quarterback that is still partially being funded by the Raiders, and he's going to help them win games, and the Raiders are going to be partially financially responsible for the Chiefs getting the dubs and most likely winning the AFC West once again. You cannot possibly write a better script here. Now, here's what I mean by that when I say Gardner Minshew is going to help the team win games, okay? He's the backup quarterback, so hopefully he's not out there on the field unless it's in garbage time during the fourth quarter or something like that, because if the backup quarterback is out there, that normally means your starter is injured. But here's how he could help. He's going to be throwing with the scout team during practice. He's going to be in the meeting rooms with Patrick Mahomes and company, watching film, going over the game plan. He'll have some say, some input from his own lens and how he would see things. And obviously, Patrick Mahomes doesn't need to listen too much to that. But Minshew is a vet that's from the Raiders, and he's coming off of not a great year, but a pretty great for him 2023. Let's dive into it real quick here. He was officially released by the Raiders yesterday, March 12th, but this isn't a surprise because the Seattle Seahawks traded for Geno Smith. And if they haven't extended him, I believe they plan to extend him. Then they have Aiden O'Connell as the backup quarterback on their roster. So you didn't need Gardner Minshew. The release was a formality. But when they released him, they kind of gave an update, and it just gave a little bit of stats. He was coming off of a Pro Bowl season with the Colts in 2023. So when you look at his stats in 2023, he threw for 3,300 yards, 15 touchdowns, and 9 interceptions. I mean, that's a pretty good season if you ask me. And then look at his first couple of seasons with the Jags, 2019 and 2020. He was a 6th round pick, by the way, of the Jags in 2019. So he's actually younger than Patrick Mahomes. I'll get to that in a second. But look at this. 2019, 3,200 yards, 21 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. 2020, 2,200 yards, 16 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. For a backup quarterback, that's not bad. Those are not bad stats. And then again in 2023, 3,300 yards, 15 and 9. 2024, though, with the Raiders, obviously a lot of problems going on there, especially on the offensive side of the ball. They didn't have a lot of playmakers outside of basically Brock Bowers, but he threw for 2,000 yards, 9 touchdowns, and 10 interceptions in 9 games with the Raiders before suffering a season-ending broken collarbone Week 11. So it's unfortunate he ended his season like that, and Aiden O'Connell, I believe, finished things out, but he now finds himself with the Chiefs after playing for the Raiders, and the Raiders are partially funding it. That is absolutely hilarious to me. Something else worth noting about this Minshew signing is Minshew is actually younger than Patrick Mahomes. So this is the first time in the Patrick Mahomes era that the backup quarterback, from what I remember, that the backup quarterback is younger than Patrick Mahomes. Why? Because Mahomes is the vet now. This man is seasoned. He's been in the league for quite a while. He doesn't necessarily need a vet that's been in the game 10 plus 15 years because Mahomes is getting close to that 10-year mark himself. So it's fine to have a backup quarterback that's a little bit younger. Those are just some of the biggest takeaways for me. I like it. Minshew can sling it. Again, it's not ideal if he's out there on the field, if Mahomes goes down in any serious capacity, but I do have faith that Gardner Minshew can help this team win. I mean, in 2023, he led the Colts to a 9-8 record, guys. All you need is a backup quarterback in theory that can help you win a couple games here or there if your starter goes down due to injury. If your starter goes down for a long time, i.e. on IR and misses the rest of the season, your season's probably down the drain anyway. So I'm not really worried about all that, but he can help you win some games. I love this signing. It is freaking fun. Let me know your thoughts on this signing in the comments down below. How surprised are you? What are you feeling? And until next time, let's go. Let's freaking go. How about those?